Hey everybody, it's Master Gallengeist here, bringing you my review for the season premiere of Game of Thrones Dragonstone. And this was a pretty good way to set off the season, because we've waited so long, and it's really cool getting into seeing how they're going through everything now that they're off the books, and how they can tie some stuff together and kind of introduce some new kind of ways to do things that you normally probably wouldn't see Martin doing in the books. So, this episode starts off and we see Walder Frey giving this banquet to like all these important people, mainly his sons and his heirs, and those that were there at the Red Wedding. And at first I was thinking, well, this is probably how Arya got the people and the meat pies or whatnot. But as it started progressing, it's like, oh, this is interesting. What's going on? Because Walder Frey's talking about how it's strange that he would do a feast, like two important feasts within a fortnight, and kind of like doing self-deprecating humor. It's like, okay, that's kind of interesting. And seeing that they're like serving him really good wine and all that, and he's like, okay, toast to everybody. Everybody drinks, not him. He tells the woman next to him that's like his wife that he's not wasting good wine on a woman, and then starts going into this stuff about like, you're all there at the Red Wedding, slaughtering all the Starks, killing a pregnant woman, slaughtering a woman who has 5 children, but the one thing you didn't account for was that you didn't kill all the Starks. You should have rooted that, like, kill them all off. And seeing the people dying from all this stuff going on with the wine and all that's like, oh shit. And like seeing the serving girls and everybody be like, what the fuck just happened? And then seeing Frey like go to his face, and it's like, that's Arya, and she's like pretty much completely wiped out the house, and it's like, holy crap. And she's like talking to Walder's wife and is like, okay, tell people when they ask you what happened here that the North remembers and that winter came for House Frey. And then she walks off like a boss. It's like, this is some pretty big stuff, because that shows that she has real in-depth mastery of the things that she learned from the Faceless Men. Now, granted, last season seeing her take out Walder Frey was important, but I mean, that was similar kind of height and everything. We didn't know if she had advanced enough for someone of Walder's size for her. She knows what to do. She knows how to tactically execute a plan to take out an entire house. She's going to be doing some shit. And it's like, oh, yes. She knows how to execute this assassin stuff very well, and nobody's even going to see it coming. She's not one of those people that's going to monologue or tell you she's going to kill you. Now, granted, the only time she was doing that was when she was learning. Now she's got the techniques to put her plans into action. It's like, okay, now we've got one hell of a wild card in the mix, because she's taken one giant player and house off the board. It's like, alright, let's see how this goes. So, then we get to see this scene with the White Walkers coming through, and granted, it's not really that much, but it is used to show kind of like the power of the White Walkers, and it really doesn't get more important until, like, as they're further on, we see the army of Whites following behind the Night King and his retinue and all that, and then we see not just one, like, dead giant, we see a couple dead giants, and it's like, oh shit. I mean, it was pretty tactically advantageous to employ that during the Battle of the Bastards, getting into Winterfell. These guys had more than one giant that don't fatigue, that don't need to eat, don't need to sleep. It's like, holy shit, that's a pretty big thing. Now, granted, since the stories that deal with the White Walkers talk about ice spiders, they might be like factoring that in, but if like ice spiders come in out of nowhere, that would just be crazy. So, Daenerys' dragons will have to be used on those big fires. So, we see that it was actually Bran that was seeing this, and him and Mira are outside the main thoroughfare for the wall for Castle Black. And it's cool to kind of get into them. They like open the gates. We see Ed come out with some of the Night's Watch. He's like, who the hell are you people? Are you wildlings or whatnot? And she's like, no, I'm the daughter of Howland Reed. This is Brandon Stark. And he's like, well, how do I know that? And then Brandon starts listing off all the stuff that he's been seeing, like the battle at the Fist of the First Men, hard home, seeing the army of the dead and all that. He's like, all right, come on in. So they go on in. Ed's like looking around and goes in, and it's like, that's kind of where we're left off with them. But we're getting movement. We're getting Bran moving south of the wall to try and join up with everybody that's living to get ahead of the Night's King. His is going to be interesting because we don't know what he's going to be attempting to do with as the Three-Eyed Raven. What we've learned before from the Three-Eyed Raven is that that person has usually been just watching and kind of waiting for Bran. And I don't know if he's like a keeper of knowledge or whatnot, but I think Bran is going to try and be more proactive and more using his warging abilities to do some damage and try and effectively combat the White Walkers. So hopefully he will be better used with like Jon and the rest of them as an effective ally and someone more proactive than what we've usually been seeing with Bran. So then we get to seeing Winterfell and like Jon and everybody talking about what they need to be doing. And this was pretty cool. We got some really good character development between Jon, Sansa, and kind of the rest of the lords. Because Jon's kind of laying out his plan. We get him saying we need Dragon's Glass. That's the biggest thing that's more important and more valuable than gold at the moment. That's the only thing that we know that kills White Walkers at the moment. And then he goes and he says anybody between the age of 10 and 16 needs to be training with like any kind of weapons available. And of course, one of the lords is talking about is like, yeah, we'll show these summer boys what real war is. He's like, we're going to be using women and girls as well because I'm not going to just throw away half of our fighting force. Then first he starts scoffing, but of course Lady Mormont comes up and just like shows him what's for, and it was cool seeing like Brienne be like, yeah, alright, she's pretty cool, and that was being like, alright, because everybody's going to be needed. This is not just a regular tactical fight. This is the living against the dead. You need to use everybody at your disposal to take out these people. And then they start kind of going into more of what they need to do. Talking to Tormund saying, you know what, I'm not your king, but I need people to man the wall. We have to do that. He's like, alright, that's cool. We'll be your Night's Watch. Just put me where you think the Night's King will go. And they're thinking that they're going to be the closest to the like seaside to like get around the wall. It's like, alright, there we go. We've got the wildlings. They're going to be manning the wall. They're going to be helping the Night's Watch kind of go through and figure out what's going on. And of course, people are like, well, what about the Umbers and the Karstarks? Because those will be the next kind of fallbacks. And of course, the one lord from the Eyries like raised the castles and everything. But Sansa's like, they're good fortresses. Castles didn't do nothing. Why don't we give them to kind of people that were loyal and reward them for that? And of course, Jon wasn't going for that at first. He's like, I don't think that I should really take away these ancestral homes from these people. And of course, they're like, treason needs to be punished and all that. And Jon's like, well, the one from the Umber and the one from the Karstarks who had raised against us for treason are dead. The punishment for treason is death. And she's like, oh, so there shouldn't be any punishment. Nobody should be rewarded and all that. And Jon, of course, talks about how he was like the Lord Commander and explaining his reasoning to the lords and everybody involved, which I think is a really good tactic. It shows why Jon is growing to be a good leader and why he needed to be in the Night's Watch to begin with in order to advance his story. So that way he has the leadership experience to be a better and effective leader. Because it explains to them what he had learned as being the Lord Commander, executing the people that had betrayed him, the brothers that had betrayed the Night's Watch, and that his father, of course, always bringing up Eddard Stark, he said that if you are to proclaim the sentence, you should be the one that swings the sword. And he's thinking that he should not punish a son for the sins of the father. And I really thought it was a good way to show the differences between Jon and Sansa, because Sansa is still in the Game of Thrones mode and the Game of Houses, and was kind of almost getting ready to kind of set up the same thing in the North. Now, granted, they always have houses playing against each other. But Jon's trying to go for more of a justice route and punish the people that did the wrong rather than punish everybody involved, being more of a fair and just king. And asks the latest living and the ones in charge of the Karstarks and the Umbers to swear loyalty to him and keep their ancestral homes and fight for the living. And seeing these kids do that was pretty cool, and then seeing, since the lords had pretty much shown approval for Sansa's way of doing things, then cheering and clapping for the people giving their loyalty to Jon and doing all that was cool to see. That we've got people that, yes, they may have differences, can get behind Jon's way of thinking of not just screwing people over just because their parents did something bad. And, of course, that leads to some kind of weirdness between Sansa and Jon, because they start talking later, and of course Jon's going along the route that she was undermining him, and she's more like, well, Joffrey didn't like his authority undermined, and Jon's like, whoa, you think I'm Joffrey? And she's like, no, you're the furthest thing from Joffrey. And of course she's talking about how she wants him to be smarter than their father and Robb. Because she was getting into a certain kind of thing. I was going to say but, and then he's like, well, father had this saying that anything before but is horseshit. And how their father tried to protect the girls from how dirty the world was. But she's like saying that he needs to be smarter than their father and Robb because they did stupid things. And he's like, well, that means to be smarter than them, I have to listen to you, right? And she's like, is that so bad? But see, the thing is, she's not even really taking her own advice. Because, granted, it should be more of a dialogue between them rather than this kind of clashing at this point, because that's going to be counterproductive to what they're doing. And both of them, of course, have set in their ways because they've grown under different circumstances being apart. Sansa, I don't think truly understands what she's trying to do, because she's always been kind of controlled, and seeing her trying to get out of this mindset and then kind of become a quasi Baelish / Cersei is kind of like, okay, I still like how they're developing and growing her character, but we still get the reminiscence of her in King's Landing doing stupid stuff. Because, granted, she should kind of like temper what she's trying to say, otherwise she does undermine her brother's authority. And granted, Jon needs to watch out with what he's saying, otherwise he's going to make it seem that he doesn't like anybody questioning him. So they just have to get that kind of rationale together. Now granted, they're still new to this kind of co-op agreement that they've got, so we'll have to see how that goes later on, because we see this coming forward as we see a Maester bring a scroll talking about Cersei, first of her name and all that, saying, come bend a knee or you're traitors, and Sansa providing wise counsel about Cersei, and talking about how she usually kills anybody in her way. And, of course, she's like, we need to watch out for the enemy to the south. And he's like, well, there's like thousands of leagues between us. And, of course, she's like, well, we've got the wall to the north. He's like, you didn't see them. Now, granted, I'm more on Jon's side because we've seen what the White Walkers can do and what their army's packing. Cersei, of course, is insane as well and has nuked the Sept of Baelor to take out everybody who was in King's Landing that was against her. Granted, I think that the White Walkers are the more pertinent problem, but that relates to the unpredictability that Sansa's telling him about. And he's like, well, it sounds like you really admire her. And she's like, I learned a lot from her. And it's like, whew, we'll have to see if she can truly kind of get through that and kind of work herself better, because it's interesting to see they've still got growing to do, even though they've become great players in the game. So, then we get to see Cersei and Jaime kind of talking about what's going on. Really cool seeing like this painter paint this giant map of Westeros on the floor, and seeing them talking about like the general situation where they're kind of screwed. They don't have any allies. They've got the Dorms to the south. They've got Daenerys coming from the east. They've got the Tyrells to the west, and they've got the Ironborn and Jon Snow to the north, showing that they do know that Ned's bastard is the king of the north at the moment, and trying to figure out what to do. And, of course, Cersei's asking him, as the commander of the army, what to do, and he's like, well, we're kind of screwed at the moment. We really need allies and all that. And she's like, well, I'm kind of building on that plan, and I learned a lot from Father. It's like, yeah, you learned how to play the game. You just didn't know how to hold on to the power. That's why you've got what you want at the moment, but you have such a tenuous hold that a slight breeze could blow it away. So they pretty much get into also trying to talk about Tommen and everything, and seeing Jaime be really affected by that stuff was really kind of cool to develop this character, because he talks about how their baby boy killed himself, and Cersei's just like, he betrayed them. That the way she phrased that is great and really shows that she feels very negative emotions with everything that's gone on with it, and thinks that everything that was done by them, even Tommen killing himself, was against her. And Jaime's more like, why would he do that? And she doesn't want to get into it. It's like, shit. And she's like, well, we're trying to get allies. And it's, that of course leads us to the Greyjoy armada coming into King's Landing, and how he's like, why would you want them as our allies? They're not really good at anything, except like stealing stuff that they don't have. And Cersei's like, well, he's coming here for a queen. So it's like, oh shit, let's see how this goes. So we get to see pretty cool stuff between Cersei, Jaime, and Euron Greyjoy. And it just really did a good job with like doing their version of Euron. Now granted, in the books we haven't gotten too much with him, so we're gonna have to, I'm kind of basing what I have of what I've seen in the show, and I kind of like that he's just almost another unpredictable card, similar to Ramsay, but smarter. Ramsay, of course, was more of a rabid dog. This guy knows where and when to cut, and when to be pleasant, and when to be mean. Talking, like when he's talking to Jaime and everything. Jaime's pretty much shitting him like, you guys rebelled and we kicked your asses. It's like, yeah, I saw you when you were fighting. It was glorious to see you cutting down my kinsman. He's like, your kinsman. I was overcrowded anyway. So, here's the thing. I know we don't have much, but you've got an armada, and what I'm offering you is the armada and 2 good hands. And granted, of course, that's also a dig at Jaime with only 1 hand, but also I think it's more to puff himself up. He's like, I know what to do with these hands. And, of course, Cersei declines him, and like, you've broken promises to allies, how can we ever trust you? It's like, okay, I know how to win your trust. And that's pretty much where he's going. He leaves to go get off a gift. Now granted, this gift could be many things. Possibly could be Tyrion, possibly could be Gendry, I don't know why, but in the books, this goes into, he was searching for a horn to control dragons. That could potentially be the gift that he's talking about. I would factor it more on that, because I don't know what Gendry would really do, other than completely annihilating Robert Baratheon's claim to the thrones, like his kin and all that. Tyrion would be one that makes the most sense, but he's surrounded by Daenerys' army, so it would be very, very hard for Euron to get to that. And another important thing that we got in this scene, as he was approaching the Iron Throne to, like, when he was talking to Cersei and Jaime, we saw the mountain come, and he's in different armor. He's in black and silver, kind of reminiscent to the outfit that Cersei's wearing. So it's like, okay, her kind of Queensguard kind of stuff. Can't wait to see what's going to be happening with him. So, a lot of cool shit going on. Alright. Let's see here. So, then we get into the Citadel and Sam. And this was this is one of those moments I was talking about where we get to kind of see humor that we're not really used to in the show. We actually see a somewhat training montage as we see Sam going through his work of getting and putting away books, cleaning out shit from the chamber pots, and, of course, serving people food and everything. And Granted, since this is a shortened season and everything's kind of shorter and we're down to the wire and every second counts, this was done effectively enough to get that this amount of time has passed and this is what Sam's routine's been, so that way we're not wondering and it's like, oh, it's been a couple months since this, we don't like lose track of time completely where he's like, why did he do this so fast? That's why I think that the montage worked pretty well, and it didn't take up too much time. It showed us what we needed, that being an apprentice maester sucks ass. Moving along. So, then we get into an important part where he is talking with an archmaester and helping him with like weighing organs and doing bodily work and all that, and he's like talking about a proposition to him because he was looking into the restricted area. He's like, I need to know stuff about White Walkers and all that. So, of course, the Archmaester's talking to him about that. He's like, well, since you're so keen on this and nobody else really believes you, I think that you saw what you saw. And then talking about, like, well, you have to be a maester to go into the restricted area, and I don't truly believe, I believe that you saw what you think you saw with the White Walkers. He's like, well, that makes you one of the people. And then he starts delving into what the maesters are, and I think this was pretty cool, talking about how everyone has thought that it has been the end. That Robert's Rebellion is like, how can we survive this? This has to be the end. Aegon's Conquest, this has to be the end. The Long Night, who rightly probably thought it was the end, it wasn't the end. We, the maesters, are the world's memory. Without us, man would be like a dog, remembering its last meal and trying to get to its first and howling when we leave the house. And it's like, yeah, and just showing the importance of the maesters, how they're living different lives, that they need to think critically to understand what's going on and to have healthy doubt and skepticism to things, but also to figure out what's going on. So I was like, okay. So this kind of pushes Sam to trying to do his own thing, which I'm kind of glad that he did. He steals the keys from one of the maesters and gets books out of the restricted area because he's like, here's the thing. Yes, people might have rightfully thought that that would have been the end of times. But here's the thing. Those people had Dragonglass and knew it was coming. Right? And it probably a little bit more know that it was coming than what's going on right now, because everybody thinks that it's all myth and legend. You have an army of the dead who just keep replenishing their ranks come at this winter and try and make it the long winter, forever winter, with nobody having Dragonglass and everybody fighting against themselves and only 3 dragons in existence. Let me put it to you this way. You're going to be maesters, but you're going to be White Walker maesters, probably, being undead sorcerers at that point. So, we'll have to see with that. So then we kind of get into back at Winterfell, and we see kind of a cool scene with, like, Brienne trying to train Podrick, and Podrick kind of getting his ass kicked. And, of course, Tormund coming up, just looking at Brienne and be like, yeah. And then, of course, Podrick gets to hit him because Brienne was distracted by Tormund, and Brienne's like, you little bastard. And then just, like, punches him and, like, shoves him over, and seeing like Tormund trying to hit on Brienne and all that. We get to see Sansa talking with Baelish, and Baelish asking her why she's not happy or anything. And Sansa's like, well, I'd like some peace and quiet. And of course, she like cuts him off. Brienne comes up, Baelish leaves, and it's nice to hear that Sansa recognizes the fact that Baelish is the one who won the Battle of the Bastards for them. Because Brienne's like, why is he still here? She's like, well, we need him and his men. Without him, we wouldn't have defeated Ramsay. And I like that because at the end, like, with the Battle of the Bastards, seeing Sansa kind of look like that, happy, like, oh, I'd achieved this victory, kind of led me to think, she doesn't completely understand what's going on here. Because this is more Baelish's victory than hers. He will play it that way, but yet he's still going to play that, like, he wants her. That's one of his goals. He wants the Iron Throne, but he wants her. Sansa even alludes to it. I'm just glad that Sansa's smartening up and understanding what kind of person Baelish is and what kind of game he's playing. She doesn't completely understand his whole game. I don't think anybody outside of Baelish completely understands his game that he's playing. The only one that can come close is Varys, because they've been pretty much tit for tatting around. But Sansa at least acknowledges the fact that Baelish is the snake that he is and is going to be pretty much trying to shut him down and not let him control her reactions. So hopefully that'll allow a kind of smoother transition with Jon later on as they're trying to command their forces. So then we get to a pretty interesting scene that we see with Arya riding and walking in on a group of Lannister soldiers. And seeing her see this other side, that there's good and bad on both sides, because these Lannister soldiers, they offer her food and drink and all that, and talking about their lives, how one wants to go home, one's got a kid that's born and all that, and seeing Arya kind of like come to terms with that, I'm like, oh, I thought these were people that she was just going to kill. Now granted, she could, but I would like it if her character understands the distinction of killing people when she needs to, but not killing people if she doesn't need to. Kind of keeping her from completely sliding into villainy and kind of keeping her a kind of complex character. And seeing her talk about and say, oh, I'm on my way to kill the queen, and everybody laughing and all that. It's like, it's great because she could say that kind of stuff and nobody will believe her because, oh, it's this young woman. She can't do any of that kind of stuff. I mean, look, she looks so nice and cool and all that. And it's like, yeah, she's murdered people. Least suspecting. She's got magic. She knows how to use it. She knows how to take a face and be a person. That's why she's the perfect assassin at the moment. But we'll have to see if her breaking off the Faceless Men lead to any repercussions if she gets to the point where they're like, you know what, you're kind of screwing up stuff in Westeros. Your name's on the list. So I'm glad to see her like evolving and get into like complete. Granted, she was also always a badass, but like cementing her badass status of being like that person that can go into a crowd, say anything, and people will kind of like dismiss it, and then she follows through on it, and nobody would be none the wiser. So then we get to see the Hound and Beric Dondarrion and the Brotherhood without banners, and of course they go to a house that the Hound was at, where he had killed the dad, and kind of left him with his daughter and all that, and we see them, of course, dead in the corner. The Hound is kind of off-put by being back here again, and of course he starts talking with Dondarrion, Thoros, and all that, and we get some cool banter and everything. Just the Hound being the Hound. I like what they've done with his character because you first think of him as just a villain, but now we've gotten him into a place where he is not trying to take away his combat prowess, but trying to be a better man and fight for the right things. Kind of being more like Brienne. Well, probably not as idealistic as Brienne, but trying to do the right thing and help people. And seeing that come through with these conversations is really kind of cool, because he's talking with Beric Dondarrion, and he's like, okay, I think you're dull as dirt and all that shit, and I don't hate you, but I don't like you. There's nothing special about you. Why were you brought back? And he's like, I don't know. I ask myself that every night and everything. And leading into those kind of conversations and talking about it, and it's like, alright. And, of course, he's like, I still don't get your stuff about the Lord of Light and all that. And, of course, Thoros is like, come, look into the flames. He's like, my luck that I would be together with a bunch of fire worshippers. And Dondarrion's like, well, probably divine justice. And he's like, the Hound doesn't think there's divine justice, because if there was, you'd be dead and that girl would be alive. He's like, bam. So he goes over to Thoros in the fire, and Thoros tells him to look into the fire. And he's like, I'm just seeing burning logs. And he's like, look deeper. And then we start seeing that the Hound is seeing things. And now, granted, at first you think, oh, he could just be making shit up. But as he's going, you can see his face. He sees what's going on. It's like, there's got to be more to this than meets the eye. There's got to be something going on here. And he sees, he sees like a castle. He sees the wall. He sees this mountain in the shape of an arrowhead. And he sees the dead marching past it. And he's like, thousands of them. And it's just crazy. It's like, wow, you see a lot of that stuff. he's now seen the stuff that Bran's doing. He's like, now you know there's a reason for us to be here. It's like, ooh. So then it goes to nighttime, and we hear shovel and digging and all that kind of stuff. So Thoros goes out. We see that Hound is digging a grave for the father and his daughter, and Thoros starts helping him and everything. And then we see the Hound try and do like rites for it and all that. And he's like, forget everything. I'm sorry you're dead. You didn't deserve this. And then he walks off, and I'm like, yeah, that's kind of cool. Real growth. He's trying to make up for the past mistakes that he's had while trying to do good. It's like, all right, this is what we're seeing. All right. So then we get to see stuff in Old Town, and a lot of stuff starts popping up. We see Sam and Jilly kind of like reading over the books and all that, and just talking about what they've learned and all that, and saying that Sam needs to sleep, but of course he has to figure out and help John. So he's reading things like, yeah, they used to use dragon glass to ornament their weapons for like the Targaryens, not understanding what it was used for. I'm like, could this be somehow reference to how Valyrian steel is made? Is it somehow that the reason Valyrian steel is so hard to make or whatnot is because dragon's glass is somehow incorporated in steel? Who knows? That could be a thing. Or maybe they were like, hey, if you put this with this, or if it's ornamented like this, it imbues the power to take out the White Walkers. That kind of cool stuff. So, of course, they're talking about it. Jilly's got the one book, and Sam's got the other, flips through, and he finds out that there is literally a mountain of dragon glass on Dragonstone, the place that Aegon started his conquest of Westeros. It's like, oh, sweet. So, we've got the source of dragon's glass that we need to fight the White Walkers. Alright. And granted, it could seem that it's a little bit on the nose to kind of say like, hey, here's a place that's got all this dragon glass. We're getting into the home stretch, and stuff needs to be accelerated a little bit in order to get everything to the places that they need to be. So, I don't really have that much of a quibble with it. Then we get something really important. We see that Sam is going through his rounds and getting like food bowls from these cells in the Citadel. It's like, okay, what's going on here? And then this one dude with this arm pushes out, and we find out it's Jorah asking if Daenerys had come to Westeros. And Sam's like, no. And we see how much the grayscale has covered his arm now. He's really in advanced stages. And this begs the question, what is this? Is this more of a quarantine place? Are they actively trying to help these people, as in with the case of Shireen, because she had grayscale but was cured? Could the same thing happen with Jorah? Is that why he went to Old Town? Or are these people being experimented on or whatnot, since we've seen an Archmaester dissecting the dead body of a Maester? And granted, he probably let his body be used for scientific purposes and whatnot, but we don't know what's going on with that, and hopefully we can see something going on with Jorah either being healed, or is grayscale coming into effect of actually making him an effective fighter against the White Walkers, to which they can't freeze him or turn him into a white because of the grayscale. Who knows? We'll have to see how that plays out and if it becomes important. I just thought it was interesting that they decided to put Sam's story and intersect it with Jorah's, and what could come of that. Alright, so then we get to the end of the episode, and I think this was pretty well done because, granted, not a lot is said, but a lot is kind of shown. We see Daenerys come into Dragonstone, and it's pretty emotional. I'm glad there wasn't that much dialogue going through it, because we see her dragons flying around Dragonstone and all that. We see her land and touch the ground and be like, she's home. This is where she was born. And they did a really effective job of having Daenerys kind of show that emotion and be like choked up kind of, and just be like, I'm finally home. I've finally done what I've set out to do. And granted, this is the first step, but seeing her being very, well, granted, she's been proactive, but actually affecting her goals and like going forth and doing it, and seeing her walking through Dragonstone, seeing that Stannis had left it unprotected and everything, unguarded, and just going around and getting into the throne room and taking down Stannis' banner was just really cool. And then she just kind of walks off, and Tyrion, of course, follows her, and Missandei, of course, holds Grey Worm back a little bit, and they like go and they see that table that Stannis had used because it's all like done like Westeros and all that. And we see Dany looking, touching the table, and we see Tyrion looking at the dragon carved on the wall and all that. And then she gets to the head of the table and says, "Shall we begin?" And that's how the episode ends. And it's like, yes, we can finally begin. We're putting everything into motion. The war with the White Walkers, Dany trying to take over Westeros again and becoming the queen, and fighting Cersei and seeing Cersei do whatever she wants to do, and see how Euron plays in that, and just seeing all the players in the game finally put into one space and see what happens. So it's like, yes. I was a little bit like, that's where it ends, but I'm like, that's a great place to end it. Just have us waiting for the next episode. So overall, I really liked how they showed all the well, not all the characters, but we touched on the most important players to set up what's going on with the season. And then we're going to start getting into delving which needs to be focused on first to get everything to its ultimate season finale and then get us to the final season of Game of Thrones. So those are my opinions on the episode. Tell me what you guys think in the comments below. If you liked it, if you didn't like it, if you agree with me, if you disagree with me. Also like and subscribe, and I hope you have a good day.